Have you ever received money from someone, from anyone outside the country, be it a family member, a relative, or a friend? Are you aware that there are policies in Nigeria regulating this receipt of money or this kind of financial transaction? Now, today, we'll be learning what this policy is called, the legal framework, guiding this policy, the requirements for those who want to render this policy, this kind of transaction in Nigeria, as well as the barriers and solutions, of course, to this transaction. Now, this kind of transaction is called remittance policy, and this brings us to the meaning of remittance policy. So what is remittance policy? Remittance, first of all, arises where, like we said from the beginning, a diaspora outside the country sends money or makes financial transactions to a dependent in Nigeria, who can be a family member, a relative, or a friend. And this is a common practice. A lot of us are beneficiaries to our friends, our families, our uncles and big aunties outside the country sending us money for whatever reason. And this concept of remittance is it's a product of migration, and it's one of the biggest contributors to cash inflow in dependent countries. We're talking about social and economic development. So now this leads us to, what is the legal framework regulating this remittance in Nigeria? Now, remittance policy is the law and frameworks or regulations surrounding or guiding the transfer of money from diasporans to dependents in Nigeria. The core institution regulating diasporan transfers to dependents, that is remittance, in Nigeria is the Central Bank of Nigeria. And in 2020, the Central Bank of Nigeria released a circular to the effect that diasporan transactions to dependents in Nigeria can only be made through dollar. That is, your relative outside can only send you money in dollar, which you now have to go ahead to convert to naira. Now, this was a practice over time for almost 3 years till 2023, when the same Central Bank of Nigeria made another regulation, a policy, to the effect that now diasporans outside the country can now send money to their dependents in naira. So we went from the dollar for naira policy to naira for dollar policy. Now, according to the CBN, this recent policy made on July 2023 it has the effect of liberalizing forex exchange and also releasing or reducing CBN control of foreign transfers and currencies. So now we'll be moving on to the requirements for this remittance. That's requirements for those who want to render remittance services in Nigeria. Now, those who render remittance services in Nigeria are called international money transfer operators, and there are guidelines for these people, for the services rendered and how it should be done. This is called the CBN International Money Transfer Services Guidelines. And these guidelines provide that, first of all, any person or agency who wishes to provide remittance services to Nigerians must, first of all, be licensed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. And the same guideline in paragraph 2.3 provides that such license must be a person seeking such license must come by necessary applications. Also, a person must have a minimum paid capital, which is 2 billion naira. Thirdly, the person must be a taxpayer, and not just a taxpayer, a person who pays tax in Nigeria. Thus, the person must have evidence of filing of returns on tax, must have duly paid tax over the years of assessment. Again, another requirement is that the applicant must have a contingency plan, amongst others. And moving on, what are the barriers to the effective practice of this remittance policy in Nigeria? The first barrier is the fact that there is the issue of market clash between operators and bank and bank agent banks, such that there's an unhealthy competition in that you know, diasporans are relying heavily on banks, thereby usurping the job market for the operators. Also, secondly, another challenge to the effectiveness of this policy in Nigeria is the issue of the exchange rate. Now we know that the naira rises and falls, rises like the sun and sets like the sun, so it fluctuates at will, and this affects diasporans who make these transfers to their dependents, in that prior to the recent policy, the naira fluctuation was not as high as it was then, and now these people are made to make transfers in naira, even to naira accounts for their dependents, and realize that by the time you are done converting money from dollar to naira to send to your dependents in Nigeria, there will be a huge disparity between the amount you intended to transfer and that of Nigeria. Now, this may benefit the dependents in Nigeria. However, it might occasion hardship for the diaspora who is sending this money with a target in mind or an amount in mind. Then again, there's the issue of the digital assets. Now we realize that diasporans are beginning to make transfers of not just money but digital assets such as cryptocurrency. The question is, how will the law bring in this evolution of this currency evolution into the remittance policy? How will it work, and what are the regulations? Because as it seems now, there's no regulation on such. We just have the one on monetary transfer, whereas we are now into a tech digital asset revolution, whereby people are beginning to trade and transfer money to their dependents through cryptocurrencies. Now we'll move on to the solutions. The first solution is that the government should make the Nigerian economy a stable and enabling one for these forex policies, because it is not just about making policies. It's the environment, it's the social and economic environment, a fertile ground for it to grow. So it's just like the forex exchange we talked about and how it impacts diasporas. So it is very important that we have a stable economy in Nigeria, which we go a long way in encouraging forex trade, this kind of forex transfers in Nigeria. And finally, that there ought to be, in fact, there is a necessity for a uniform law regulating remittance in Nigeria. As it stands now, what we have is just policies, and from what we've seen, it appropriates and reprobates at will. Today it is this, tomorrow is that. That's leaving diasporans and Nigerians at the expense of, or at the whims of, whoever the CBN governor is or whoever the reformer is. So it's really important that there is a law on this. We have it's important that we have laws and policies, laws on this beyond just policies that can be made and changed at any time. In conclusion, it can be seen that the remittance policy has the potential of driving cash inflow and economic growth in Nigeria, because as projected by Nairametrics, between 2019 to 2023, there was a graduated cash inflow of over $46 million from this remittance alone. Now, if the highlighted solutions are effected, then the possibilities in remittance policy, in remittance, will be harnessed. Thank you.